And we just talk like we're in a living room.
A living room, okay.
Yeah.
Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, and together with my co-host, Mark Ronich of jbiztekveli.com and Statewide News Service.
Well, Rabbi, we always like to bring in community leaders and community activists from the area. And one of the community leaders we're very happy to have with us today is Susan Holland.
Hi.
She is the executive director of Albany Historic Foundation.
Historic Albany Foundation.
Historic Albany
sorry.
Foundation. That's fine.
We need to change our name, I think.
HAF, H-A-F.
Right,
Okay.
exactly, yes.
So, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
And what does the Historic Albany Foundation do?
Well, actually, we were celebrating 40 years this year.
How many?
40 years. We've been around since 1974. And we actually, our main mission is to preserve and protect buildings that have civic, architectural, or historic value. So we've been doing the same thing for 40 years, and we do it through education and what we call technical services and some advocacy. I think we're more well known in the media for the advocacy piece of it, but
Of course.
yeah, but we like doing the education piece of it the best, I would say. So like we're doing today.
Well, the city is 400 years old, isn't
Exactly.
it? Though? Well,
Yeah,
yes, 10%
exactly.
of the years.
Yeah.
So why did it take only up until 1974 to form something like this when we've had so many great historic buildings here?
Right.
Was there something going on in the 60s and 70s besides the Empire State Plaza being built and going through that whole area?
Right.
Is there something that was going on that really crystallized and made this happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it was the activist 60s, if you will. In 1966, they did the National Preservation Act. So there was more things talking about, that's when they established what they call the National Register of Historic Places. So the city of Albany was getting a lot of pressure with the plaza, but they were supposed to expand that further. There was supposed to be...
Expand the plaza further?
It was actually going to be what they call the Crosstown Arterial. It was going to kind of wipe out the park, wipe out the next wave of neighborhoods in the Capitol Hill section, basically where Robinson Square, Hamilton Street, Hudson, all of those, Center Square, done. And
all those brownstones?
A lot of them, yeah.
Wow.
So there was going to be actually an arterial that went over to, I guess it would be where 787 is or 90 there. Yeah. And that we just said no more, that's it, we're done. And we had a great leader, Louise Merritt McAllister. I can never get this right. Louise McAllister Merritt. I probably switched them up.
Louise, that's right.
Who is actually lives in England now, but she started it with Matthew Bender, who a lot of people know, and said, okay, no more. But their real mission was to do not so much advocacy, but education.
Not there recently. I've been here
Right.
for around 30 years.
Right.
And the Empire State Plaza was built already.
Right.
And the story that I got was that was old Albany, a lot of stories, and they just knocked them all down, the whole
Right.
neighborhood, in order to make it Empire State Plaza.
They did, and they did it through eminent domain, which honestly they're still using that idea today. But it's funny that you mentioned that. There's a new movie coming out, which will premiere on December 12th on WMHT called The Neighborhood That Disappeared. And while there were every nationality that lived there was a very strong Italian neighborhood. And there was a real fabric, just like you see today in a lot of neighborhoods, but there was a real fabric there, and it was destroyed basically by this plaza.
There were Jewish store owners.
Yes, there was
That's
a
how
lot
they
of,
were
yes.
saying-
Yes.
That's what they say. Oh, when
Yeah.
I came to town, he had a Jewish store, but
Right.
it was in the Empire State Plaza, and they knocked it down.
Right.
But wasn't it for the better that we knocked that whole area? Like, I could understand that there'd be so many more homes throughout the city of Albany that really should be knocked down, and because they were built for a time that we don't live in now.
You could say that.
There's closets that we need that we use now that people used to put their linens under the bed, so they don't have closets in the house.
Right.
But we don't put linens under our beds, so now we got to build closets within the house. There's one car garage. People didn't even think they'd live to have more than one car. So it's a different era. Shouldn't the housing change with that?
Well, I'm going to give you the new vision of preservation, I guess, because we could talk. How long do we have for this program?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. We could talk about this for hours, and
no.
you do not want to get me going on
I did
the whole
already.
thing. Yeah.
Go ahead.
But let me give you. I think the new version of preservation right now. You hear a lot about the millennials, which again we're having this debate over the age, but there's a lot of and empty nesters who want to move back to an urban setting, have a more green footprint also, And the millennials, actually, they trade clothing, they trade food, they trade services, and they want to live almost like our ancestors lived, I think. And so they're going back to urban settings and living in these buildings that are very well built. They still function perfectly well. These people are riding bikes, doing car share. You know, Albany has car share now, which is really exciting. And so they want to be connected, and they don't want to, they're basically using their own, not making their carbon footprint so large. So that's what historic preservation, believe it or not, it's like the full circle coming there. And I said, you know, I really think, I said this to the State Historic Preservation Office the other day, I said, I really think that preservation is about the millennials and bringing it forward. So
And millennials are people who were born in the 1990s and 2000s?
Yeah, basically, yes.
In that 20-year period?
Possibly the late 80s too.
The cities are
Possibly,
getting
yeah.
rebuilt now. I mean, you say New
Right.
York, but I don't know if I agree with you totally. I go to Brooklyn,
Yeah.
and you know, you get these 5-story apartment buildings,
Right.
and how many car spaces can you have? Five,
Right.
6, and everybody, like you say, you know, there's subway systems, so I guess they built it saying, hey,
Right.
go on the subway if
Yeah.
where you want to go.
Yeah.
Not everybody has a car, and you can't find a parking space.
Right.
Well, obviously, that's what we're
Right.
going to do, knock down a whole neighborhood because.
Right.
Well, you know, I just think if it's, you know, we have a lot of decrepit homes. We have a lot of homes that really should be knocked down for safety reasons. But people like yourself, you want to save the facade at least, like at the Wellington.
Wellington's actually 2 buildings, actually.
But you were
Didn't do that.
successful with
Yeah.
getting, and I love the Wellington, but you were
Yeah.
successful in having that facade at least
Right.
remain. So
Yes.
kudos to you for that. But
We had
I'm
to wait
still,
years.
you know, you look around, I mean, I'm sure that there's some wonderful history and wonderful stories about the buildings on Clinton Avenue. But again, first, second, third street, I mean, a lot of that could
Well,
go
you know, you
away
gotta-
and build nicer homes where people with higher incomes would want to live there. And
I don't know if that's going to draw them, though. That's the thing. I'm not sure if
it's a start.
a house is going to, that kind of building's going to draw them. But, I mean, our thinking is they're there, that's a funky urban living, like Brooklyn. I mean, you look at some of these communities that came back. Look at Harlem in
Yes.
the 80s. I mean, nobody was going, you know, people were there, but they weren't investing. And then all of a sudden, nobody can afford a building. You know, only the very wealthy can afford a building in Harlem.
Condos in Brownsville are $1 million now.
Yeah, I mean,
It's just amazing.
I was
But-
in Jersey City working when I was a kid,
Yeah.
like, you know, just out of college, and I'm looking around and thinking, you know, $30,000 for a building? Can you imagine what those buildings are worth? And that's what we want for the city. I mean, that's what you want to attract new residents, visitors, people to bring your standard of living for everybody up, not just, not just
Again, I know the Jewish
wealthy.
community. I know that Bernie Saul, maybe you know Saul's equipment,
Oh, yeah.
people in Albany.
Yes.
And well, he passed away a number of years ago, and he gave the building to his children, and still sitting there boarded up. So I says, well, why don't you knock it down? You know, it's an old building. Even when I visited him, there was an old building. Oh no, they told me. This is the oldest building in Albany. It's historic, and they can't. So it's sitting there as an eyesore. I mean, I didn't talk to
It's not
his
an
kids.
eyesore.
Oh,
to you.
Rabbi. Well, Rabbi, I have something to tell you about that.
Yes.
Historic Albany owns the building.
Right.
Oh, really? I didn't know
We are,
that.
yes, we bought it from the next, Mrs. Saul, whoever the heir is from,
Yeah.
the Saul family. Actually, I didn't even think about that as a connection to the Jewish community.
Yeah, he
They
owned it.
sold it to a gentleman named Brian Parker, and then Brian actually deeded it to us. The lands around it, I don't know if you read Business Review this week, but all the properties around it were owned by the Convention Center Authority,
Yes.
and that's where they were going to build it. So now, the governor said, no, we want the convention center, a different spot, smaller, whatever, great spot, excellent, everything's being redone on that corner. So now we're down with a big request for proposal. So we're sitting in the middle of that property, those properties. We're hopeful for a grant. We applied for a grant to plan what to do with the building. We actually put up siding the other day. We have a lighting display. It is the oldest Dutch building in Albany,
Yeah.
1728, but don't let Assemblyman McEnany come on the program and dispute me on that.
Because it's
He
the
thinks-
original boundaries of the city of Albany,
Right.
not where
Very good,
Quackenbush
yes.
Square is,
Yes.
which used to be Manans,
Right.
and now it's the city of Albany,
right.
and now that has an older building in it,
That's-
but it's
yeah,
still
yeah.
from, at that time was
Right,
Manans,
right.
it wasn't Albany,
Yeah,
so
but
the
we-
boundaries.
yeah,
But-
and
so
it-
that's
we-
the oldest building within the original boundaries of the city of
yes,
Albany.
1728. So
Okay.
we have dendrochronology from Cornell University.
So
to
you're
prove it.
going to rebuild it and
We are,
model it?
yes.
And what would be the ultimate purpose? Like a museum?
We're hopeful for some type of visitor center because there'll be a lot of synergy there. We're kind of waiting. I mean, I hate to be so reactionary, but to
No.
wait for what goes on around us because if it's going to be, a hub for commercial, for a bus terminal, then we're going to be doing something. If it's housing and the millennials and the empty nesters come back,
But what about a Jewish museum, Jewish Heritage Museum?
we're good. We're good.
Yeah. Now, you are Jewish?
My father was Jewish, yes.
Okay, not your mother.
Not my mother.
Okay.
So we weren't raised in the faith, but I have family members. My dad is buried in a Jewish cemetery, so yeah.
Yeah. So Holland is not necessarily from Dutch. You're
No.
not necessarily.
That's actually my married name.
Your married name?
Married ex name.
Okay.
Herland's was my name for my
Okay.
yes.
Actually, I was looking at this,
Wanted to
and
throw
I don't
that
know
in.
if people
Yeah.
can see it, probably not. It's very small, historical capital city on the Hudson, Albany, New York. And just going through this, really, obviously it's for historical reasons, but I think it's a good pamphlet for the visitor center.
Yeah.
Because, a few places I haven't even seen.
Oh, good.
and
Schuyler
been here.
Mansion is where Hamilton was married. There
Yeah.
was Alexander Hamilton, our
Yes.
first treasurer.
I mean, do you give this out to visitors?
Yeah.
As to,
Actually, we didn't do this.
can they see it?
Yeah, get that
It's hard
color.
to-
Oh, we have to tell them it doesn't pop well on TV.
Yeah, I know. There it
actually-
is, if you lean it right. There
yeah,
you go.
Yeah. This was actually an initiative from the mayor of the new
Really?
Mayor Sheehan, yes.
Oh, it's brand new.
Yes, it's
Oh,
brand
very
like 2 weeks old, maybe.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Hot off the press.
Hot off the press, yeah.
yes.
So awesome.
So what's your favorite neighborhood in the capital,
gosh.
in the city of Albany?
Oh my gosh.
And you do live in the city, right?
I do.
Okay.
I live in the Beverwick, what's called the Beverwick neighborhood, which is a very long sort of area. Gosh, what's my favorite? I have a lot of them, actually, for different reasons. I've always loved Ten Brook Triangle, where we own St. Joseph's Church, too, and it's going back to the city at some point. But that neighborhood is just exceptional, I think. And it's even, Clinton Avenue, that whole area. Buildings have always maintained their value there, and
Yeah.
there's a very mixed income neighborhood. I think it's so central to stuff.
That's around the corner from Palace.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Love the South End. I love the South End. The South End is like old school, colonial, sort of, you can really feel the history there a lot. Yeah, Mark, you're looking at me and then my other
Yes.
favorite, which you all probably don't even know about, is the Rapp Road Historic District, way out in the Pine Bush.
Yeah.
Which, actually, you all have a connection to that, too. The people that ended up at Wilborn Temple were the founders of that community. The church, Church of God in Christ, who bought Kojak, who bought the Congregation Beth Emeth building at the corner of Lancaster and Swan. Yes.
Yeah,
and they came from Shibuda, Mississippi to start a church in the south end of Albany, in the Great Migration in the 1920s, late 20s, and realized that they didn't want to live in the south end, so they moved out to this Pine Bush
How
area
smart
and were
they are.
farmers. And they have these little, I won't call them shotgun shacks, but they're very small. And we're working right now to actually help them restore them and get a plan together because there's a lot of the second or third generation that's here wants to come back to the houses. So
just from the beginning, are you a private organization? I
We
don't
are.
know who's,
Yeah.
the city pays you or no?
on some grants, but nothing major. We're not
Not
funded
like-
by them.
yeah.
No,
Right.
no.
But Matthew Bender is still part of
He is.
the board or the advisory committee
He
or
is,
something,
and
right?
the
So-
help and one of the basic funders for the Heritage Guide for the city also.
Well, he's
so.
major funder for a lot of things.
Yes, he
He's,
is. Yes, yes.
Explain who Matthew Bender is for those who might not know.
Matthew Bender is a philanthropist in the local area whose family started here in printing. I'm going to say the 1850s, but I might have got that date wrong. And so basically a major philanthropic family, but he's done a tremendous amount. They have the Bender Family Foundation, which gives a lot of money away to lots of great causes. And it's wonderful to work with them. We actually just were awarded a grant just to repair part of our roof at our warehouse. We have a parts
And
warehouse.
you're on 79 Lexington?
89
89
Lexington, where we have architectural parts warehouse where we sell back
And where is that?
between Central and Clinton Avenue. So
On what street?
on Lexington.
On
Yeah,
Lexington.
we have one big gigantic building. Yeah.
Okay. And then, because Lexington Auto is like 2 doors down.
Yeah,
from
that's
it.
our neighbors. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And actually, we have another initiative there too. We've been trying to help with a whole group of us formed with community leaders and the Central Avenue Bid and the Albany Housing Authority to really clean up the block. And Councilman Robinson is at the end. Mark Robinson is at the historical area. So we've been working really hard to clean that up.
And Matthew Bender was also involved with the restoration of the Capitol building.
Very much so, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The leader of it or something?
Yeah,
or
I think he was
something.
chair of the board.
Chair of the board,
Yeah. He's still totally involved. He's in the Heritage. We have Heritage Working Committee for the city of Albany.
Well,
so.
that's great.
Yeah.
So tell me what research you've done regarding the Jewish community, because when you talk about, you saw the history that I wrote,
Yes.
that I sent you?
Yes.
So there was a synagogue on Bassett Street, there was a synagogue on Pearl where the
yeah.
Times Union Center is.
Yep.
There was a synagogue on the corner of Ferry and Pearl,
Yep.
which was which was literally
Yes.
huge, but it was destroyed because of urban renewal,
Right.
which is a code word for something, because there's a gas station there.
Yeah.
So I don't know about urban renewal, but
Right.
what that could mean. And then DMV is on that same property. So this beautiful synagogue just went away.
I know.
And we just have pictures now to remember it. But we still have on Herkimer Street a former
Yes.
synagogue that
What
90.
year are you talking about that all this was taking place?
1960s.
Yeah.
The 60s.
60s with the urban renewal, but the buildings were there in the 1840s.
Right.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the same, but when
Yeah.
they decided to knock everything down.
1960s.
60s,
Yeah, the Robert Moses sort of idea that, again, with all of the, sort of the idea of the plaza and people wanted to live in grand structures and have great freeways and stuff, that whole idea goes with the urban renewal idea. So, it's very sad. I had a lot of fun researching this,
Good.
actually, because I don't know a lot about it. But actually, I had a good conversation with the city historian, Tony Alpalka, today. And we decided we were going to take, because the congregations were sort of ebbing and flowing together, and there was a lot of movement, I guess going from like an Orthodox Judaism to a Reform, and Rabbi Weiss
Right.
was amazing. I mean, just the father of the Reform movement in the country.
Right, was
correct?
here in Albany.
Albany,
Yeah,
yes.
It started right here.
Yeah, for a long time. So he really, there's a lot to say about him, but looking at all the congregations and how they kind of moved together, we
And-
want to put those together with all the buildings that existed. So
Right.
there's I'll show you the chart.
And I'd love to work with
Use
him on
mine.
that. That would be great.
Yeah, your thing was very helpful, but we were still having a debate. So this was kind of the movement of,
Beth
I don't know if you guys
Emmett.
can see it,
Yeah,
but
it's going to be hard to.
yeah,
Okay.
the movement of, and this book is Historic Albany, Its Churches and Synagogues, done
Oh,
in
very good.
1986.
Really? I didn't even.
yeah,
never
it's
saw
Yeah,
wonderful.
such
where,
a
do-
book
where
like that.
would someone get that online or
My mother gave it to me for Christmas gift. I don't know where
a
she got
holiday
it.
gift?
Yeah, oh, excuse me. A holiday gift. But it has
I never
everything in
even
here.
saw
But this
like
was
that.
done,
Yeah.
I think, for the tricentennial in 1986
that
in the
would,
city.
That would make sense.
And
yeah.
each thing had a special service.
Each synagogue?
Each synagogue,
Yeah.
each church,
Right.
any I don't know if the
Special
Quakers
service.
participated,
Yeah, because
but
it was interesting because Beth Emmett moved to what is now the Wilborn Temple, and then they moved to their current building,
Yes.
and then Ohav Shalom was on Washington Avenue, and then
Yep.
they moved to their current building.
Right.
And you could see that the migration of the Jews were from the south end going up into Midtown Albany,
Right.
and then going up
Out.
into where they are
Right.
now, which
Right.
is the southeast end of Albany.
right.
And by the Thruway and
Yep.
that sort of area. So you can. It's interesting that
Right.
as the Jews moved,
Right.
the synagogues moved with them.
Yeah.
And when I first came here, Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob was at 66 Hackett.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
right.
we would have to walk from there up to everyone else's house.
Right.
But there were
Which is
one or
my
two
house.
people who still lived close on Edgecombe and Summit and those
Right.
smaller streets,
Right.
which is where the Federal Street synagogue
Right,
used to be,
right,
and then
right.
66 Hackett was in back of it.
Right.
So we used to, and the Hackett Boulevard down there wasn't even paved.
Oh, I
They didn't
know.
have anything, so we had to walk on the stones,
Yeah,
and
didn't
the
like
water
going
would
there.
be splashing, and when cars went by, and we'd have there'd be potholes. It was just like really rural.
Rural. Yeah, I've seen pictures, but
So-
how late was that? I mean, how late?
Late 70s.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that late because I've seen
And-
pictures from the
Must have been
30s.
in the
And then the
into
80s is when they built the new synagogue
On Whitehall.
on Whitehall Road,
Right,
and then
that.
because that's where the Jewish community was, and that was farmland.
right.
Where the Albany JCC is, and all
Oh,
that
yeah.
area on Whitehall Road was farmland.
Oh yeah, I guess.
So
I'm
that's
thinking.
where the synagogues, B'nai Shalom was a break off from Beth Emmett.
Right.
And they built out there, and then Beth Abraham Jacob built on the farm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Let me
Well,
ask you something.
Sure.
I mean, what authority do you have? For example, even though against what Mark says, he doesn't. He wants to knock down everything.
Everything, yeah, no,
But let's
can't
say
throw it
you
overboard.
see a historical building like a brownstone or
Right.
whatever, and some developer says, "I'm getting rid of this.
Right.
This is old hat." And maybe it's Mark the contractor.
Right. Well, yeah.
I think, hey, you can't do that.
Right.
This is historical. So
Right.
what would be your step? I mean, do you have any authority to stop it? Or
No, not really. That's the funny thing in the city. It's really funny. I mean, we've been the author of some of, or helped to write some of the regulations, but we, just as I guess as technical service, we're providing technical service, like saying, hey, look at this. We're kind of the people who ask if you could hold down the regulations that are already in place, the laws, the real ordinances that hold our fabric together here, and say, hey, what about this? I mean, we have a case tomorrow night for the planning board that it's okay, can we do our homework? We want you to do your homework, but we'll help you do the homework, I guess.
That was mid-November when
Yeah.
you're going to have the...
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah.
All right. So
mid-November,
Yeah.
and
So, for example, I had contacted you
Right.
regarding that Herkimer Street Synagogue,
Right.
which is now a church, and then
Right.
they were leaving, and we had stained glass there
Right,
that we wanted
right.
to rescue
Right.
to bring back into the
Yes.
Jewish community.
Right.
And I mean this respectfully because you have a lot of pull. I mean, your opinions are taken very seriously and with a lot of weight
Yeah.
amongst the city government
Yeah, it is.
agencies.
Yes.
Okay, so I have to tell you that.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
So they, but you said, we really want the building to be intact, but if it's going to endanger some of the product,
Right.
then we would let you, and we wouldn't oppose. You wouldn't say
Yeah,
let
I
me.
didn't-
We
yeah, I'm
wouldn't
still
oppose
pondering
you
that. Yeah.
taking
Yes.
that, and that's what I was able to tell the board
Yeah.
when the historic board, when we went there,
Right.
that you at least said that you wouldn't oppose it.
Right.
You wouldn't.
Yeah,
you'd look
and-
away- you
yeah.
didn't want to encourage this type of thing
Right.
from happening.
Right,
And I
right.
respect that.
Yeah.
And I thank you for that.
Yeah,
But,
and it's hard as I looked at the building a lot knowing I was coming here today, and I kept looking at the former synagogue, and I kept thinking, and that question kept going through my mind. But preservation is a very gray area, unfortunately.
Yes.
The laws are written where there's a lot of flexibility. So sometimes, we get to a point, we like to do the education, but stick to the fact. Like, how does this look? How did you follow the law? There's lots of laws that you can follow along. Where does it fall? How are you getting funded? And then put all those facts out. It's not an opinion, really. It's not like, oh, that color is terrible, or, you can't change that. It's what does the law look like and who's interpreting it? So we have a Historic Resource Commission, which would govern what
That's
you were
right.
going to do on that building.
Right.
And we would go to them and say, okay, yeah, but, then there's the legal part of it, where if you're not following the rules and all the laws, I have some pretty good lawyers. And we depending
Yeah.
on what it is, I mean.
But no, I heard no one wants to mess with Susan Holland.
Mark,
true.
that's kind of flattering in some ways and not the other ways.
But if you put your hexure, your
Yes.
approval
Yeah.
on something, or your opinion really counts and
Yeah,
matters,
yeah.
because they weren't going to, this historic commission,
Right, Historic Resource Commission.
Resources Commission,
Yeah.
they were happy that I consulted you first. They were pleased that I
Yes.
got the priest or
Right.
the reverend, and I got the rabbi, and we all came together in
Right.
the same room.
Right.
And it wasn't just me blowing smoke and
Right.
trying to
Right.
con them with something.
Right.
So, there was one guy on the panel who actually they had to have a unanimous opinion.
Yes.
And one guy said he literally held his nose and said he wanted to vote against it.
Yep. I know who that was.
But he felt that because he likes to keep these buildings intact,
Yes.
totally intact.
Yes.
So he kind of went along with it, but really
Right.
held his nose, and it was. But I haven't raised the money yet, so I haven't touched those stained
Oh,
glasses.
okay.
So until I can raise the money, I'm not doing anything with it.
Right.
But I got sort of the process in place, and we're going
Right.
forward with it.
Oh, good.
Because I
Okay.
really want to save that. I want to bring all that beautiful
Right.
artwork that's for the that the Reverend and the church, the Kojic Church, left for us.
Right.
Well, maybe the Historical Society can take it and put it part of their Jewish museum.
Well, no, I mean, we would love it, but they don't
Right?
have 50 grand unless Matthew
We
Bender
would
writes a nice check.
No, that's going to be a hard nut to crack with a lot of other things that have to be done. Remember those
Exactly.
buildings you were talking about?
Exactly. So,
But I appreciate that. I mean,
Money.
I look at some of the churches that have been destroyed, and a lot of people, at least in the religious world, where the Christian world, is they pay to have a memorial in these houses of worship.
Yeah.
And when people come along and destroy the building, then you lose that too.
Yes.
And those go to, the trucks back up. I've seen it done. The trucks back up, and the stuff is just given to people, and the antique dealers are walking off.
That's it.
And you think, wow, somebody put that in a house of worship for it to be remembered forever. You think that's the safe place. Sometimes you're better off planting a tree, and I just think so. That's what I kept going through in my head. And we would probably have a fierce debate with the Historic Resource Commission too, just as it's almost like an academic exercise. What do you do? And
philosophic.
yeah, it's very philosophic in some ways. And you're like, well, it belongs with the people that put it there. And
And that's who we want to bring
Right.
it back. We want to trace those names that are engraved in the glass, and
Right.
we want to trace it back to their families,
Right.
and say thank you,
Right,
and
exactly.
here.
I
We
wish-
have them funded for a memorial.
Well, they don't want to. I went that route. They don't want to do that yet. So
Yeah.
we got to get a philanthropist. But anyhow,
And you have a history of doing that with the Kojic Church that's
Yes.
still at Wilborn Temple.
Right.
The Ark was taken out of there and moved to, I'm going to get the church.
B'nai Shalom.
B'nai Shalom. Oh, okay, right, because I read that, and it was in storage for a really long
Yes.
time, 1957 to 79.
but it's really impressive. It
Yeah,
really is
yeah,
impressive.
yeah. So
Yeah, I took pictures of it, so at least I can put it on my website and actually have
yeah.
some sort of record in case something happens. So.
And that's the important part of preservation too. If we don't have the buildings, or we don't have the stuff, as I call it, we need to catalog it somehow and have it, for generations to come. And that's what we ask for a lot of time on the demolitions. We say, okay, so the building's not going to be there, so let's record everything, measure, do what we have
That's
to do.
interesting, yeah.
Yeah, it's a mitigation measure, really.
What would you like to talk about in our last few minutes that we didn't bring up and discuss? And
Two things about synagogues
Okay.
things that, my favorite things that I got to see when I was looking at this stuff. Ohav Shalom, have you seen their YouTube video? And when they celebrated 100 years of their synagogue, they did a video of somebody had a video from 1963 and 4, groundbreaking, when they moved they were on Washington Avenue, and they had a fire, and then they sold the building to SUNY, and then went to Central Avenue, and moving the Torahs out, and going to a groundbreaking, and rededicating the land, and it is the coolest video. It's 14 minutes long, and it's like a slice right out of the 60s, and we don't have a lot of that stuff. And we also worked with, we've been working on a group called Partners for Albany Stories, and we feel like that could represent, some of that movement, because we actually have pictures, and it's absolutely amazing. And my last thing is my favorite synagogue that I've been in so far. I haven't been in all of them. And we do a ton of work on houses of worship, and the Percival Goodman building on Academy Road, Temple Beth Emeth, that he is a world-renowned national art. Well, he worked nationally. He did 50 buildings between 1949.
The architect of that.
Yes,
I didn't
Percival
know
Goodman.
that.
He's in our book.
so it's not a
Architects
Frank
in
Lloyd
Albany.
Wright.
It is not,
design.
no.
Okay.
And in fact, the craziest thing about him, which I just read, he was a professor for a couple years at Columbia University doing architecture and possibly, I don't know, preservation. He became an activist against people tearing buildings down for urban renewal. So I thought, that's so weird, wow. And he did a thing called Communitas on city planning, and he was very famous, and that the synagogue is exceptional.
It's one more thing that close to ours is the Temple Israel was on Parcher Street near Woodlawn.
Yes.
It was so, like you say, all these synagogues from inner city went a little bit further and bigger and better, and further, and then became a church. And the church then wanted to get bigger and better, went suburbs, and now it's back into Jewish hands. And our kids go to that school, the Maimonides Hebrew Day School. So it went from Jewish to church, and now it's back to a Jewish day school.
Right.
So again, things like you say go full circle sometimes in these cities.
That's awesome. That's great.
It's just, there's a book of architecturally significant synagogues.
Yes.
And Beth Emeth is in that book.
It should be.
Yeah.
He's
and it is.
amazing. Yeah, I've seen I saw a pamphlet
There's
that he did, and somewhere, and I should have bought it.
There's a synagogue in Philadelphia, Elkins Park,
Right.
that's Beth Shalom, that my brother goes to, and that was a Frank Lloyd Wright design.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
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 that.
And if you put it on the National Register, then you're eligible for all kinds of different funding. And I had actually encouraged Rabbi Shbeen to do that at Temple Beth Emet because he was saying they needed some help on the roof. And I said, so put the building on the National Register. It's an easy one, very easy, 1957. You have to have 50 years in, and then
Right.
it's architecturally significant, et
And
cetera, et cetera.
is he doing that?
I don't know. I have to talk
Oh,
back.
yes.
I haven't talked
Right.
to him again. We had a tour a couple years
Susan,
ago.
like you say that we're out of time, but we have to ask you back because you have so much more
I told you.
information to tell us.
Yeah.
And we want to thank you, your good work that you're doing.
Thank
we
you.
deal with people as rabbis, but buildings are important also.
Yes.
Yes.
And you continue good work with good health.
Much
Thank you.
success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.